Hurtgen Forest, November 12, 1944. Somewhere in the frozen woods south of Aachen, an American soldier is screaming. He has stepped into the Wilde Sau minefield, the wild sow, and now he is lying in the mud between the German and American lines with shrapnel buried in his pelvis and his abdomen torn open. And he cannot move because every inch of dirt around him is hiding the same weapon that just destroyed him. The weapon is called the Shrapnel Mine 35. The Americans call it the Bouncing Betty. It weighs 4 kilograms. It contains 182 grams of TNT and roughly 360 steel balls, each about the weight of a penny. When a soldier steps on the 3-pronged trigger, a small black powder charge fires first and launches the mine about 1 meter straight up into the air. Waist height, groin height. And then, half a second later, the main charge detonates and throws those 360 steel balls outward in every direction at once. The lethal radius is 20 meters. The casualty radius is 100. It was specifically engineered to do what it just did to that American soldier in the Wilde Sau. Not to kill him, to maim him. To take his legs, his eyes, his ability to father children. To make him scream so loud that every man in his platoon freezes in place, knowing that the same device is sitting 3 inches under their boots. A dead soldier ties up nobody. A wounded soldier ties up 2 to 4 men. Medics, litter bearers, evacuation crews, surgical teams. The Bouncing Betty turned every single casualty into a logistics crisis. That was the design. That was the point. And on this frozen November morning, a German officer named Friedrich Lengfeld is listening to that American's scream. He has ordered his machine gunners not to fire on any rescue party. He has waited hours for the Americans to come get their man. Nobody comes. So Lengfeld does something that will get him killed. But we will come back to that. 3 years before the Hurtgen, on the other side of the Mediterranean, the S-mine had already earned its reputation in a place the British called the Devil's Gardens. October 23, 1942. El Alamein, Egypt. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel had laid approximately 500,000 mines across the western desert in belts stretching 5 to 8 kilometers deep. Teller anti-tank mines formed the backbone. But scattered among them, clustered around the edges where infantry would have to crawl in and clear paths by hand, were thousands of S-mines. The minefields were not designed to stop the British advance. They were designed to channel it, force the tanks into narrow lanes, pin the infantry in the open, and let pre-registered machine gun, mortar, and artillery fire do the rest. The S-mines existed to kill the engineers who tried to open those lanes. Lieutenant General Bernard Montgomery threw Operation Lightfoot at the Devil's Gardens with everything the 8th Army had. 500 of the brand-new Polish Mark I mine detectors had been rushed to North Africa just in time. These detectors were designed by a Polish lieutenant named Józef Kosacki, who had given the patent to the British for free. King George VI personally thanked him with a letter. The detectors doubled the clearance rate, from 100 to 200 square meters per hour. That still was not fast enough. The Matilda Scorpion flail tanks, fitted with spinning chains meant to detonate mines ahead of the treads, broke down constantly. Chains snapped. Engines overheated. Most clearance reverted to combat engineers on their hands and knees, probing the sand with bayonets, one careful push at a time, while mortar rounds exploded around them. The S-mine held Montgomery's entire attack 2 full days longer than planned. Tanks jammed up behind the minefields in a traffic nightmare at the Oxalic line. Engineers died by the score. And the Eighth Army learned the hard lesson that would follow Allied forces for the next 3 years. The S-mine was not a nuisance weapon. It was the centerpiece of German static defense, and the Germans were about to lay a lot more of them. By early 1944, Rommel had been reassigned to the Atlantic Wall in northern France, and he brought his obsession with mines with him. His chief engineer, General Wilhelm Meiser, received a directive that read more like a wish list from a man who had seen what minefields could do and wanted to multiply that effect by a factor of 10. Rommel wanted anti-personnel mines, anti-tank mines, anti-paratroop mines. Mines that detonated when a wire was tripped. Mines that exploded when a wire was cut. Mines that could be remote controlled. For the Ile Saint-Marcouf off Utah Beach, Rommel ordered S-mines to be sown like grass seed. Vice Admiral Friedrich Ruger, Rommel's naval advisor, recorded that in the months Rommel ran the Atlantic Wall preparations, 4 million mines were laid on top of the 1.7 million already in place. By June 6, 1944, approximately 6 million mines studded the coastline of northern France. D-Day did not play out the way the movies suggest, at least not everywhere. At Utah Beach, the 12th Infantry Regiment landed and reported what it called light casualties. According to the historian Stephen Ambrose, the majority of those casualties came from S-mines buried in the dunes and hedgerows behind the beach. The beach itself was survivable. The exits from the beach were the kill zone. After the initial assault, American engineers lifted approximately 15,000 unexploded S-mines from the dunes around the single village of Pouperville. 15,000 from one village. And still, the worst was yet to come. September 1944. The Hürtgen Forest, a 50-square-mile stretch of dense pine and fir trees along the German-Belgian border south of Aachen. The U.S. Army sent division after division into those woods over the next 5 months, and the forest consumed them. The Germans had prepared the Hürtgen with everything they had learned about defensive warfare over 5 years of fighting. Tree-burst artillery that exploded in the canopy and drove shrapnel straight down into foxholes. Interlocking fields of machine gun fire along every firebreak. And minefields. S-mines, telemines, shoe mines with wooden bodies that no metal detector could find, glass mines made entirely of glass. The ground was frozen. Digging foxholes was nearly impossible, and the mines were everywhere. On November 2, 1944, the 28th Infantry Division, known by its Keystone shoulder patch and already nicknamed the Bucket of Blood, attacked through the woods north of Germeter. 300 yards into the advance, the men of the 109th Infantry Regiment walked into an S-mine field nobody had mapped. Mortar fire rained down on them while they stood frozen in place, unable to move forward, unable to retreat, unable to do anything except listen to the soft pop of propellant charges going off around them and know what came next. The 28th Division suffered 6,184 casualties in the Hürtgen, roughly 45% of its original strength. The official U.S. Army history, written by Charles MacDonald, called the division's attack on Schmidt the most costly American division-strength assault of the entire war, and concluded that it represented a major repulse to American arms. 10 days later, the 4th Infantry Division's 22nd Infantry Regiment entered the same forest. Their commander, Colonel Charles Buck Lanham, hosted Ernest Hemingway during the battle. Hemingway, who had covered wars on 3 continents, looked at what the Hürtgen was doing to American infantry and called it Passchendaele with tree bursts. The regimental historian Robert Sterling Rush later calculated the cost. The 22nd Infantry Regiment took 2,806 casualties to advance 6,000 yards. That is roughly one soldier killed or wounded for every 2 yards of German forest gained. And it was in the middle of this that Friedrich Lengfeldt walked into the Wilde Sau. Lengfeldt was a lieutenant in the 2nd Company, Fusilier Battalion, 275th Infantry Division, 23 years old. His unit had pushed the Americans back from the Forester's Lodge that morning, and as the Americans withdrew, one of them ran the wrong direction and stepped on an S-mine. The GI went down in the minefield. He was alive, and he did not stop screaming. Lengfeldt told his machine gunner to hold fire. He waited. Hours passed. No American medics came. At roughly 10:30 in the morning, Lengfeldt assembled a small team under a Red Cross flag. He knew the layout of the German anti-tank minefield along the road and walked his men through it carefully. Then he stepped off the road onto the verge to cross toward the wounded American. He triggered an S-mine. Lengfeldt's runner, a soldier named Hubert Gies, saw it happen. The mine launched into the air and detonated at chest height. Lengfeldt took 2 deep holes in his back, each the size of a coin, with severe internal injuries beneath. He died that evening at the Freutzheim aid station. He was 23. The identity of the American GI he tried to save has never been confirmed. 5 days later, another German soldier named Alphonse Bürzel was killed by an S-mine in the same Wilde Sau field. Gies survived the war. He carried the story with him for 50 years, and in October of 1994, retired Major General John Ruggles, who had served as the executive officer of the 22nd Infantry Regiment during the Hurtgen, led a group of American veterans back to the Hurtgen War Cemetery in Germany. They placed a stone monument at Lengfeldt's grave. The inscription reads, "No man hath greater love than he who layeth down his life for his enemy." It is the only known memorial erected by American soldiers to an enemy officer in a German military cemetery. The Hurtgen Forest consumed, in sequence, the US 9th, 28th, 8th, 4th, 1st, and 83rd Infantry Divisions, plus the 5th Armored Division, the 2nd Ranger Battalion, and elements of 17 divisions total. Over 88 days, from September 19 through December 16 of 1944, American losses reached at least 33,000 killed and wounded. For 2 regiments, the 9th Division's 60th and the 4th Division's 22nd, casualties reached 100% of original strength. The S-mine was not the only killer in the Hurtgen. Tree bursts, mortars, machine guns, exposure, and trench foot all contributed. But the mine was the weapon that German doctrine had specifically engineered to slow an advance, demoralize an infantry force, and bleed it dry before it ever reached the defensive line. And it worked. The US Army's official medical history recorded that cumulative mine fear was a primary contributor to combat exhaustion in the Hurtgen forest. Men could not sleep. They could not move without imagining the soft give of a trigger prong under their boot. The historian Paul Fussell, who served as a second lieutenant with the 410th Infantry Regiment and was himself wounded by a shell blast in Alsace, wrote that the gap between the sanitized war the home front was shown and the actual physical reality of the front lines was filled, more than by any other weapon, by mines. The S-mine was the war's most refined instrument for producing the kind of degraded, ignominious wounding that never made the newsreels. Between 1935 and 1945, German factories produced approximately 1.93 million S-mines. After the war ended, somebody had to dig them up. In France, roughly 3,000 civilian workers and 49,000 German prisoners of war were assigned to mine clearance. One academic estimate found that by September 1945, 2,000 German POW deminers were being killed or maimed every single month. In Denmark, approximately 2,000 German POWs cleared over 1.3 million mines. 149 of them were killed. In Norway, 275 German prisoners died clearing minefields. The S-mine's design lived on. The United States produced the M2 bounding mine in 1942 and the M16 in 1953, both direct descendants. The Soviets built the OZM series. The Yugoslav Prom-1, used in the Balkan Wars of the 1990s, is an S-mine cousin. Virtually every major army on Earth copied the concept. In 1997, the Ottawa Treaty banned anti-personnel mines worldwide. The Bouncing Betty and its descendants are the defining weapons that treaty was written to eliminate. Somewhere in the Hurtgen War Cemetery, between rows of flat stone crosses, Friedrich Lengfeld's grave still carries the monument the Americans placed there. A German officer who ordered his men to hold fire, who waited hours for a rescue that never came, who walked into a minefield under a Red Cross flag to save a man he had been fighting that morning. The mine did not care about any of that. That is what 360 steel balls at waist height will do. They do not distinguish between courage and cowardice, between mercy and malice. They simply detonate. And the man who built them knew that. If you want to see how the Hurtgen Forest became the deadliest battle the US Army tried to forget, that video is on screen now. Subscribe for more stories like this one.